Okay. Good evening and welcome everyone to the Gathering Place. As always, we meet on the last Wednesday of each month. So today being May the 29th, we have our guest that we have been promoting for the last couple weeks, and her name is AJ, and she comes to us live from Chicago. So thank you, AJ, for being part of our Gathering Place. I
Thank you.
wanted
Thank
to
you.
you're welcome. I want to just introduce you with a formal introduction because this woman is very special, and I want you to have an idea of where she comes from and her background. So AJ Nova is an anorexia survivor, Nervosa survivor, pardon me, and inspirational speaker and author. Through her work, she is shining a gentle but much needed light on eating disorders across the entire globe. Even though it's been 30 years since she struggled with anorexia, she continues to be in recovery and is much more than a survivor. She is a thriver. So she wanted us to all know that eating disorders are even more present now than they were 3 decades ago when she almost died from one. Shockingly, and this you may find very interesting, I did for sure. Shockingly, we lose someone to an eating disorder every 62 minutes. AJ firmly believes that through educating preteens, teens, parents, guardians, teachers, and coaches about eating disorders, we can turn that tide. And when we understand the power of words, self-love, and self-approval, we can bring awareness and help to save lives. So she's here tonight to share with us her story, and we have some questions that we want to ask her specifically, and then anything else that comes up in conversation, feel free to share with us, AJ. So I wanted to start by welcoming you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Sending you a little heart from Chicago.
Oh, cute. Okay, and here's one from Manitoba, and it's not even a
Thank
frozen
you.
heart because it's nice out. Okay, so my first question to you, I think the audience would really appreciate knowing is, and to ask you, how did you know you had anxiety? It's kind of a two question. How did you know you had anxiety, and what surprised you the most?
So this is going back to 2018, and I didn't know I had anxiety. I thought I was just stressed. And I had an important job in the big city, long hours, making a difference in the world. And I just thought, like everybody else, I was stressed out because my eyelid was twitching because I couldn't sleep. This wasn't part of my eating disorder journey of 30 years ago, but we'll get to it later when I really believe I had an anxiety disorder at that time as well. But what really made me stop and think about maybe this is more than stress was that I had panic attacks,
Mm.
severe panic attacks, so that I would have to leave my office where I work, go outside, sit on a bench, and breathe into a brown paper bag. In the United States, where I am at, oftentimes parents pack lunches for their kids for school using a brown paper bag. I don't have one handy, but that's what I would. I would take that bag and I would breathe into it. And it worked. It calmed me down. But it was a daily occurrence,
Mhm.
sometimes multiple times a day. And I come from a background where you had to be tough, and you had to, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I just wanted to persevere, but it became really difficult to concentrate. It became difficult to work 60 plus hours a week.
Mhm.
And yeah, but it was really the brown paper bag when that was the only thing that was calming me down and making it possible for me to focus. And
Mhm.
mind you, I'm one of those perfectionistic people who really excelled, who always, were a good worker and a good student. So I was committed to my job and I was committing to doing the best I could. But my body, my health, something was off. And
Mhm.
then I started doing research, went to talk to my doctor, and lo and behold, this was anxiety. So I didn't know I had one. And that was the biggest surprise. I didn't know I had anxiety. Um, And what I wanted to add was that before that diagnosis, I didn't believe in anxiety.
Mm.
I really thought that people made up anxiety as an excuse to be lazy, to not come to work, to just give themselves an excuse to relax. Because I was that, hard-hitting go-getter, working 60 plus hours a week, being active at home and active in the community. I'm like, what anxiety? Everyone's stressed out. There's no anxiety. So you're talking to someone who was on the other side of the fence, who really poo-pooed anxiety and anxious feelings. And boy, was I wrong.
Thank you. Yeah, so you were experiencing this on a daily basis, and then fast forward, how long before you actually reached out to your doctor? Like, what did you do? Like you tell us what you did about it, but when did you actually seek professional help? Do you remember?
Yes, it took me a while because, again, I am that type of person who doesn't like to admit that there's a problem that I can't fix. I really, that A-type personality where I will conquer whatever it is on my own.
Hmm.
Admitting to myself and then to somebody else, even a professional like a medical doctor, that there's an issue, I perceived it as a failure. I grew
Mhm.
up in an environment where excelling was important, and failure, I had a fear of failure because failure meant, an F on a test and a red mark, and you don't fail. So it took me several months of this struggle, and I actually turned into drinking alcohol. So I started drinking a glass of wine or two, and then three with dinner to relax. And
Mhm.
that was the second sign that told me, no, this isn't normal. You don't have three glasses of wine with dinner on a daily basis to calm down. You have to admit to yourself that something is wrong and you need help. And
Mhm.
that was tough. So if someone is listening to this, or maybe you're catching a replay, and you're struggling, I'm here to tell you it's okay to say, I may need help, because I wish I asked earlier.
Mhm.
I wish I did, because it was tough to live off of wine and brown paper bag breathing.
For sure. And I always say to people that acknowledges is the first step to change.
Yes.
Once you acknowledge, like you mentioned, it's not normal to do the pattern that you were repeating on a regular daily basis, then it's only once we acknowledge it, then we can make the changes. That doesn't mean it's an easy change. So were you able to transition after you reached out for help? Did things change for you? What was sort of the turning point after you reached out?
Somewhat. It was a slow process for me because, again, just admitting that there was a problem,
Mhm.
I was embarrassed.
Mhm.
And I really felt like I failed at something important. So I talked to my doctor, who said that there is medication, but I was really concerned about some of the side effects that are studied and known. So I started falling into what's known as analysis paralysis. I
Mm.
started doing research online about medication and anxiety, and um, anything to prevent myself from taking the next step, which would be maybe going on a medication, maybe interviewing for another job and leaving what I was doing, which was unheard of to me at that time. Because, again, I've never failed at anything before.
Mm.
But what really helped me was researching alternative ways of helping anxiety,
Okay.
such as learning more about breathing techniques.
Mhm.
Because I knew about meditation, but sometimes with a busy brain, it can be difficult for me, and I know for others too, to meditate and relax that way. So I started reading up on breathing, meditation, and breathing exercises, and also CBD, which are supplements from hemp, that can help with anxious feelings.
Mm.
So that's really what happened, but it was a slow process. I'm here to tell you that I am not a poster child for dealing with anxiety in a swift and efficient way. I took my time
Yeah.
because I was embarrassed.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And yes, it's not something easy to come forward with. I also lived with anxiety and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and I didn't go for help for the longest time because my behaviors were so odd and unusual that I didn't know what I had necessarily at the time, but I also was scared to find out. And then after
Yes.
several years of living with it, then when I did get help, I thought, wow, I can finally put a name to it and life's going to get easier. But really, that's when the hard work really began. So I don't think I think you are the rule, not the exception in that way. And I
Mm,
as well, because most of us feel that way. And we feel like we've failed if we're not able to figure it out. So it's good that you're out there. And now you're a role model for other people that are out there wondering as well. So it's beautiful. So what is the connection? Because as we introduced you, you are anorexic nervosa survivor. What is the connection between anxiety and eating disorders? What can you share with me on that or share with the audience?
absolutely. So what I didn't know was that there is a profound connection. In fact, a 2004 study here in the United States showed that about 2/3, so 75% of people with eating disorders have suffer from anxiety. Not
Mm,
just anxious feelings once in a while, but actual anxiety. And it's when we talk about eating disorders, there's a spectrum. You've mentioned anorexia nervosa, which is what I went through, which is when you don't eat on purpose to lose weight. But we also have bulimia, when you eat and then you return your food, for example, through the use of laxatives or vomiting. And then there is binge eating, and then we have orthorexia and other forms of eating disorders. So there's a spectrum, and people fall somewhere on that spectrum. Sometimes it fluctuates. Like I had anorexia, but I also binge ate. So 2/3 of all eating disorder sufferers also suffer from anxiety. So it really goes quite hand in hand.
mhm.
And when you think about it, it makes sense, because someone who suffers from eating disorders, um, it is a mental health issue. We now know that we acknowledge it. We studied it,
Mhm.
um, but they really are fixated on food
Mhm.
or avoiding food.
Mhm.
So, and it's not just, I think the easiest example would be Thanksgiving or a Christmas holiday, if you celebrate Christmas, or any other birthday party or a family barbecue gathering. A lot of the things we do as species, humans, um, revolve around food. Our gatherings are
Yeah,
around food, right? We go
right.
out to dinner to celebrate a birthday or someone's,
Mhm.
anniversary or a graduation.
Yes.
Um, and if you're suffering from an eating disorder, you want to plan your day, your week, your month, your every hour around food and avoiding it. So for
Mhm.
someone like me with anorexia, I would think ahead, like, how can I pretend that I'm eating but really not eat? Or where do I throw away my sandwich? I was a teen when I went through anorexia, so I would have a lunch and I would throw it away. And how do you plan your workouts, and how do you get those extra physical activities in? So in addition to food, you think about how do you move your body to burn any calories you eat.
Right.
And then, someone who's bulimic, they have to plan when will they go to the bathroom and, you
Mhm.
know, purge whatever
Mhm.
they ate. So those are just examples, but studies show with eating disorders, particularly anorexics, but not only, that even when you're asleep,
Mhm.
your body is thinking about food or how to avoid it. So
Yeah.
it's a nonstop. You're not really resting. So
Mhm.
that anxiety, that anxiousness, those feelings of anxiousness about Am I going to have to eat? Can I get away with not eating? What will I do? How will I get my physical
Right.
activity in? It's never ending. If you just research online, put anxiety and eating disorders, a lot of times people refer to it as a vicious cycle
Mm,
because
mm,
it never
yeah.
ends. You're
Mhm.
stuck in it and you're stuck in it and you're stuck in it. So all this to tell you that 30 years ago when I was severely anorexic, I know I had anxiety, but I know now I didn't know that then. But today, and going back to 2019, when I really wasn't suffering from an eating disorder per se, but I did drink that wine quite a bit. And I was leaning into, maybe this could have become an addiction later. That anxiety about with my work was very much present. And I am just not surprised that so many people who are stressed out, but also have anxiety and also may have unusual eating patterns
Yeah.
have that have all of that kind of
Mhm.
working against them, if you will.
Yes, very much so. And I like your description of just like this vicious cycle. We have that with anxiety. And I think the main thing again is acknowledging it because we have an
Yes.
event, at the top. I kind of look like to use the analogy of a clock. At the 12
Mhm.
o'clock position, you have some type of trigger. So whether it's thinking about your food or thinking about where you're going to be at a certain time, and then that triggers the anxiety, which comes to the 3 o'clock. So then you've got to do an act of some sort. It's kind of like OCD in the sense you obsess, then you do a compulsion to alleviate that obsession or that anxiety. And that's sort of at the 6 o'clock. And then the 9 o'clock position, you feel a little bit more relaxed. And then the clock will always strike 12 again, I say. And then the anxiety comes again. So when I am working with clients or doing speaking events, I often do use the analogy. Both OCD and anxiety work similar in the pattern of the brain processing, but the behaviors can be very, very different, of course. So, but anxiety is always present with OCD, and not everyone, like you say, 75%, that's a lot. It
That's
may
a
not
lot.
be everyone, but it might even be higher depending on if people come forward with their symptoms as well, right? So
Yes.
thank
it
you.
And it's also interesting. Let me just add that,
Yeah.
after COVID, this is 2024, but, after the whole COVID pandemic, we have seen an increase in eating disorders and disordered eating in teens and adults, but also along with the levels of anxiety that, were off the roof for so many of us during the pandemic. We have seen a spike in self-harming in teenagers, at least here in the United States. So there is that, as you said, that compulsion almost, to
Yeah.
punish. And that's a whole, segment of population and a whole sector of a topic to discuss as well. But yes, there are so many factors
Yeah.
coming in.
Yeah. And I'm just on my third book right now, and I'm talking about my third book is all about anxiety,
Hmm.
anxiety, stress, and overwhelm. Those three
Yes.
things, because everything starts out with anxiety, then that leads to stress, then that leads to overwhelm, where you just shut down. So, and like you said, the younger populations, it's targeting the younger populations as well. So, it's very prevalent. And COVID, you're right, absolutely. COVID was a game changer on many different levels, wasn't
Yes.
it?
It
Yeah,
sure was.
yeah.
Very much so.
Well, thank you for that. So that kind of leads us to, and I guess we've kind of answered it, but the next question I had is, does anxiety ever really go away? I guess maybe in general terms or for you specifically. Did your anxiety, once you recognized it and worked on overcoming it, does it ever leave you, or is there still days where you have anxiety?
There are some days that I do. I found CBD supplements from hemp to be helpful for me, and what they do for me is they make me more centered. So, before we got started here on this call, you and I were talking about my family situation, and we have an elderly family member who requires a lot of care and has memory loss issues. So that can cause anxiety, and sometimes it will spike up. And so no, it doesn't ever go away. There are days when I'm just coasting, having a fabulous time, and then an event, maybe something with my grandmother will trigger me, and it's just like, oh my goodness. So I don't think it ever goes away. I am in such a much more better place than I was before. Of course, I've changed jobs as well. So that was a decision I made. And, COVID is no longer with us. And, but yes, with CBD, but also learning, breathing techniques. I really enjoy square breathing or 4x4x4 breathing, which is when you inhale for 4 seconds, keep it in for 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds, and then wait to take another breath for 4 seconds. Such a simple thing, very simple. Even I can do it. I picked it up off of YouTube, and that helps. So yes, it doesn't go away.
And
there are days who are free of it, but that's okay. I have tools now in my toolbox that really help me.
That's great. And that's my last question for you was, is there any tools or things, coping strategies that you use or that that work? I know for myself, like you said, you've got tools in your toolbox, and that's a big factor. That's important. And the breathing technique is something you can carry with you anywhere, and you can do, and people will not even acknowledge that you're doing it. So
Exactly.
is there other things that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, so the breathing technique works really well for me because I can do it in my car or if I'm at work, and it's like you said, nobody sees what I'm doing. So sometimes you could be self-conscious about, maybe taking, a CBD jelly or some CBD oil, or another thing that works well for me is EFT or tapping. But that's very, visible because you're touching on certain points around your your face and your body, and you say a certain script like, even though I am frustrated right now, I love and accept myself. And it helps with that anxiety. It really does work because those are meridian points that kind of correspond to points in your body, but it's visible.
Right.
So maybe if you're in a meeting or you're at work and you're feeling anxious and you don't want other people to see you, tapping, maybe breathing is the best way to do it. But if you have to go outside and breathe into a lunch paper bag to get your relief, do that. As you said, Sandra, before, I want to reiterate, I wish I acknowledged that I needed help earlier. My pride, my perfectionistic tendencies, my fear of failure prevented me, and I struggled for months. And honestly, it wasn't necessary. I could have gotten relief months earlier. So I encourage you, whether it is breathing, tapping, or other modalities that help you, please use them. But acknowledge that there's a problem. Seek professional help. Everywhere you go is confidential. You don't have to suffer like I did. It is okay to ask for help. It doesn't make you weaker. In fact, it makes you stronger because you can acknowledge what it is, find out exactly what the problem is, and then come up with a solution. So if there's one thing you remember from this talk is to acknowledge that there might be a problem and ask for help.
Thank you. Thank you, AJ. And I'm sure the audience is wondering, how are you doing now? I'll end with that. If you could let us know, how are you doing now with both your anxiety and your anorexia nervosa?
Oh, thank you. It's so much better. I am still in therapy for eating disorders for anorexia because I spent 30 years avoiding talking about it, acknowledging that it happened. So the last 2 years have been tremendous, and I have seen really, really big improvements. But it is it's kind of a curve. Some days are better than others. Sometimes when you're in therapy and you touch upon trauma, you could get triggered. I'm writing a book to help people, and I had to take a break because it became too much. But overall, please know that I'm better, and I am so much more hopeful. And again, with anxiety, most days I'm fine. And on days that I get triggered, I know what to do. There are those tools in the toolbox, and I am no better than you. I am not more special. I am just like you, and I'm getting help. I have better days now. And if it's possible for me, it truly is possible for you.
Thank you. Well, that was very uplifting, given that the topic is not such a topic that
Right.
we want to talk about, right? But we need to talk about it, and you're inspiring
Yes.
for others. So you have mentioned you're writing a book. Can you tell us, have you been in, had any books out thus far? What has been happening?
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, I have a small chapter in a wonderful book called Reach Your Greatness.
Mhm.
But James Malinchak and Nick and Megan Unsworth, and it's available on Amazon. Those are just short, really short chapters of people's stories. And Sandra, you're in it as well.
Yeah.
You are one of the co-authors. So if anyone wants to read some inspiring stories, check out Reach Your Greatness on Amazon. And then my newest collaboration, it is second edition of Transforming Trauma. This beautiful book is also available on Amazon, Transforming Trauma. The subtitle is Inspiring Stories and Powerful Tools for Manifesting Peace, Hope, and Healing. It focuses on women only, and it's just a beautiful compilation of true stories of survival, of overcoming hardship. Beautiful cover, and even more beautiful message. Transforming Trauma on Amazon. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. And thank you all for listening and joining us at the Gathering Place. We will meet again, as I said, every last Wednesday of each month. And I'm just in holiday mode because I just got back from holidays early this morning. So I've got to keep track of what day that would be. So we are looking at our next Gathering Place will be June 26th, Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Hope you can join us. We also have our Q&A that runs every first Wednesday of the month. So our next one will take place on June 3rd at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And next month for the Gathering Place, we're actually going to have a fella who is a counselor in addictions and why people use while living with anxiety. So hope you can make it out to both of those. We always can be reached at www.theocdcoach.com or email info@theocdcoach.com, and always by phone 1204-295-4408. And thank you once again, and I will meet you there.
Bye.
Bye.